And it's even better than that. After he was voted guilty, the prosecution asked for the death penalty. Athenian law permitted the defense to offer a counter.
I still can't believe the clip was choked. Wait, 3-1, that shit is still raw.
Was a public commendation and a house. I think the house. Not 100% sure. The jury chose death. Lincoln pardoned someone for attempted bestiality. That just sounds like someone couldn't get hard for a zebra and he told them it was fine and they should try again in half an hour. The shortest war in history was the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. It lasted 30 minutes. How did it happen? When Beethoven was challenged to an improvisation duel by one of his rivals, Stibelt, Beethoven took a piece of Stibelt's music, turned it upside down, played it and then improvised on that theme for over an hour. Stibelt simply left halfway through and never returned to Vienna where the duel took place.
Magenta, that's a whole ass tune. I hate when it does it.
James Madison wrote a series of letters for President George Washington and the Congress to each other. There were 4 letters in total, and neither party knew that it was just Madison writing the letters to himself and reading it aloud to the other party. He was too embarrassed to say anything. Sounds like a real John Barron move. Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian II reigned 1564, 1576.
That took me shit.
Concealing a really large amounts of peaches and cherries and chilled white wine. Sounds like a delicious way to go. Napoleon was once attacked by a horde of bunnies. Please continue.
Wait.
It was the only country in Central America with English as a primary language due to coral
reefs and pirates. Oh, man.
Pirates once captured Julius Caesar and tried to hold him to ransom. When they told him how much the bounty would be, he laughed in their faces, then demanded they increase the ransom cost. He was worth more than that. Was a power move. Edit. Can't believe I forgot one of my favorite history facts. The Greek philosopher Empedocles died by jumping into Mount Etna. He was either attempting to become an immortal god or trying to convince the
Oh, we got that. Wow.
Either way, he didn't come back. What a massive spoon. Oh, it gets better. Caesar made these guys love him. He entertained them, played games with them, told stories, read poems and plays, and assured them he'd crucify every single one of them once he was free. So, once his ransom had been ready, he got some soldiers and immediately...
I swear, shoot is overrated in 2K21. Like, literally. Especially the building, man. It's so easy to average like 60 points a game and not even trying. Look at that. So unreal. So not fair.
Every extinction level event, every plague, every war, every depression, etc. All the way down to you. Be grateful for it, and try to make all that struggle worth something. : edit. Your edit does make yours more accurate. At least one of the events was 90% or more. The Great Dying. I think there was one other that was close, but not quite 90%. And most of the others were close to the 70% you changed it to. I think there were 5 great extinction events, but my memory is really rusty on this topic. Tiffany. Gary, there's one in the Nibelungen named, which was written around the year 1200, and shadow medieval names. There's something called the Tiffany problem among fantasy historical writers. In that they can't name a character something like Tiffany even though it's a medieval name.
Literally, that's all you gotta do. Go snatch bag, like, it's too shit. It's easy, dog. I swear. Beat it.
Portugal exclusive rights to trade and colonization below the Canaries, with the goal of making a vertical line instead of having this new world fall under Spain's sphere. And in the negotiation, the Portuguese randomly asked that the line be moved west by a few thousand miles or so. This only gave Portugal more sea while potentially giving Spain land in the Pacific. So they accepted. A few years later,
Magenta
was discovered with its gold mines, tropical wood and cash crop climate, placed under Portuguese rule by that line shift. According to the code of canon law, any newly discovered territory fell under the jurisdiction of the diocese whence the expedition left. Therefore, the bishop of the diocese of Orlando is also the bishop. The Catherine wheel firework is named after the execution method known as death by breaking of the wheel during the medieval and early modern periods. The felon would be tied to a large wheel and the executioner would break his bones with a staff before giving the death blow to the chest. The Catherine wheel also inspired the stupid ducking body wheel skeletons in Dark Souls. Zoom fighting is an even worse form of torture than the original wheel itself.
I'm there. Imagine how that jump shot made the NBA. And down, wet. What? Imagine me missing that. I'll let him shoot all day. Okay.
And Mussolini were all nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize but never won. How the duck? In 1864, two ships shipwrecked on the desolate Auckland Island, 300 miles south of New Zealand. They were unaware of each other's existence. Due to massive differences in leadership, from one ship, all survived.
Oh my goodness.
The Grafton was shipwrecked on the 3rd of January 1864. Her castaway crew waited a year for a ship to come to their rescue, which, it soon became apparent, would not come. 6 months later, 3 men decided to set out in a dinghy and managed to cross a distance of 450 kilometers, 280 mi, to Stewart Island, 30 kilometers, 20 mi, south of New Zealand, South
No way. Oh my god, I didn't match.
to pick up their remaining companions. The crew spent a total of 18 months on the southern Toptic Island, and
What's
despite
that, what?
all survived. End Wikipedia whole link.
I don't see how I missed that.
The Interpol struck the Auckland Islands at 2 a.m.
I don't see how I
on the
missed that
11th
shit.
of May 1864.
Done it.
Broke up and was totally destroyed in a short amount of time. The Interpol crew, right from the time of the shipwreck, was dominated by an ethos of every man for himself. Individual
Oh
crews,
shit.
such as the cook, were abandoned to die just a few hundred yards
I
from
love
the rest of
when
the
every time I go for a fucking foul, they're always in a bonus.
Violence was commonplace, and the captain was primarily interested in his own survival. Eventually, when just 3 of the crew remained alive, they had the good luck of being spotted by a ship which had sailed in to repair a leak. It's very interesting and well worth a read. This is incredible considering that they were only about 10 miles apart, as the crow flies. The article does state that the infighting and crappy leadership of the Interpol crew was partly due to having almost no resources and food, compared to the Grafton. Roman Emperor Caracalla once visited Alexandria. One night he went to a theater show and the actors made fun of him during the show. It was just part of the program. He wasn't amused about this, so he ordered the entire population of the city, one of the biggest cities in the empire, to be executed for the mistake of a couple actors. Must have been a funny guy, but he also murdered his brother in front of his mother.
Oh damn, that's kind of fucked up.
Roman Emperor Titus had the Colosseum flooded in
On everybody. On everybody.
Romans also invented our
On everybody.
decapitate ostriches. Arabs invented decapitate ostriches. But
Still?
why?
Oh, no, still.
When Montana was a part of Idaho territory with Wyoming, the Abraham Lincoln
Oh, last thing right here.
to become the first territorial judge in 1863. On his way to Lewiston, the territorial capital, he was forced to spend the winter in the gold rush boom town of Bannock, Montana. Here he saw gangs of highwaymen stealing from improving mines. Most visible
I don't even care.
innocents, allegedly led by Sheriff Henry Plummer. During the winter, fed up with the thieves and lack of law enforcement, Edgerton and other community members banded together to form the Montana Vigilantes. On the 9th and 10th of January, 1864, they stormed Plummer's home in the middle of a blizzard, dragged him out of bed and hung him from hastily constructed gallows next to 2 of his deputies. Over the next few weeks, 20 of Plummer's men were summarily arrested and executed by the Montana Vigilantes. Edgerton, instead of going to Lewiston, went back to Washington, D.C. with
Magenta. Oh, it's too easy.
large to govern. He spent that gold lobbying to split up the territory, and when the time came to draw the map, Edgerton drew the Montana-Idaho border
Ah,
from
damn,
130 miles to the west of the agreed border, the Continental Divide, stealing a massive resource-abundant region from Montana. So that's why the Montana-Idaho border doesn't follow the Continental Divide. Montana history is sometimes quite interesting when you get into it, especially when you consider that the state was built upon people taking the law into their own hands. Prostitutes in ancient Greece would put their prices on the bottom of their sandals so that they could advertise their services while giving them. Wait, how would people see the prices?
Oh, good job, man.
I don't know if
That's
it's history on
fucked.
this, but supposedly at some event between the Polis and ancient Greece, an old man was looking for a place to sit.
No contest on that shit?
No one offered him their seat, so he kept looking. When he got to the area where the Spartans were, all of them stood up and offered him their seats. He turned back to the others and said only in Sparta it pays off to grow old. Apparently Spartans had a huge respect for old people. They thought if you fought life long enough to grow old, you must be one tough SOB. Also, fun fact about Spartans, there were two main ways to integrate in Sparta: dying during military service or, surprisingly, dying during childbirth. Both were considered equally honorable. TBH, I find Sparta really interesting because of stuff like that.
That's too easy,
There were
dog.
some tough duns. The Battle of
Right,
Tessel
Joe.
is the only instance in history where a cavalry troop, horse-riding soldiers, captured a fleet of ships. It happened on this day in 1795, though it wasn't exactly a battle.
Too much space.
You
That's
can
like.
ride a horse on water if it's cold enough.
Damn.
The water, not the horse. Henry VI had a mace with a concealed gun built into it. He would take it out patrolling the streets of London, looking for ne'er-do-wells, like a fat ginger Batman. Celtic
Get
warriors
that.
fought
Get
naked,
that.
and this terrified the Roman armies. In my opinion, there were 5 feet 4 inches naked man jumping at you with a spear was
There.
scary, considering they were head hunters. Seeing them naked while deep within
Bang.
your friend would be quite terrifying. During the Second Persian invasion of Greece, Xerxes I ordered to build a bridge to cross the Hellespont. All the garments
Oh no, my hand's right on the ball.
were made by engineers.
Parfait. Oh, get him.
When the work was almost done, a terrible storm destroyed the bridge. Xerxes was so pissed off, so he ordered all of their soldiers to whip the sea 300
Too much
times.
space, magenta.
Yeah, I can see that response. I'd be pretty pissed too. After the American Revolution, a French guy tried to bring a
Yeah,
colonial and a
I'll
beaver
take
and
that.
such to the US. The metric system was new back then.
Magenta!
Long story short, he got kidnapped by pirates and died before he reached the States. Titanic was pretty much the nearest to an unsinkable ship as it's possible to build. It was just a 1 in a billion collision that caused relatively little damage, but spread over a large area. That could sink her.
Too much space.
Such a collision had never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. In survivability, she was surpassed only by her 2 sister ships, which were modified after the disaster to appease the public. The modifications were something of a knee-jerk reaction and were never used or needed. The main problems was that the cold turned the metal brittle, so the rivets snapped rather than warping, allowing the plates to come loose, and that the ship tried to dodge the iceberg, which made a large gash across the side. Had the ship just slammed head first into it, it would have been relatively fine. William Henry Harrison skipped the coded map for his inauguration day address. It was unusually cold that day and he proceeded to give the longest inauguration speech in history. Dead 31 days later from pneumonia. Someone called him away.
Fuck.
Genghis
2
Khan and his
kids.
subsequent 2 generations killed millions of people. Entire cities. Villages wiped out.
Damn.
Skulls stacked
Still.
so high.
No still.
From the distance, they look like
That's too
snow-capped
easy.
mountains. So many bodies left by the roads, that the grease and liquid from the rotting flesh would turn into marshes. The sacking in Baghdad was so violent and bloody that the infrastructure still hasn't recovered 800 years later. This empire killed so many people that it affected climate change, though I can't find my source for that. If you count the fact that the Black Death probably infiltrated Europe,
I swear all the animals is playing this.
you can tack on an additional 50 million deaths to its bill in Europe alone. So
Also, guys, I'm probably gonna start playing some PUBG on here. So,
specifically, they believe that
it's gonna be great.
is not to be spilled.
Actually, something other than 2K for once. Oh no, that's all shit.
Most of the time they do something heinous like boiling people
So look forward to something other than 2K for once.
that technically didn't shed
Not
blood.
gonna lie.
In at least one instance, however,
Oh, dude,
they
I'm
got
right
the
there.
nipples all together and laid them flat on the ground.
Oh, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there. Wide open. Splash. Just fucking graded in a man's eye.
Slowly crushing the people below.
6, 5, 4.
This all comes from Dan Carlin's hardcore history.
Goodness space. Great squad, man. Building my own fucking brick house today.
He decided to send a relatively small wrecking force over some mountains in what I believe is modern-day Russia, Georgia region, just to see what is on the other side and come back. Well, this wrecking force ran into an entire ducking empire and straight up conquered it. Ducking, like, and subscribe.
Yeah, put me on. Come on, dog. Here you go.
Imagine the places we'll go together. Expedia.
Oh, you got me there. Oh. I wanted to shoot it, but he started cutting. Damn.
The number of aircraft destroyed during WWII is greater than the number of aircraft that
Oh, there.
Of course it is. The number of destroyed planes has thousands of
Green.
zeros in it. The loss of life in the world wars. Around 38 million in WW1 and around 16 million in WW2. Just thinking about how catastrophic and damaging that must have been for people and communities is something I just can't comprehend. WW1 buddy battalions were common in Britain, where they would recruit and keep men together from local areas. The idea being that the connection would help morale and bring them together. Just looking at the dead from the Battle of the Somme. 72,000 plus people died from
Magenta. That's too easy. Too easy.
losing all their men and boys. Hundreds of families who knew each other. Who all on the same day find every recruited soldier from that area
Splash.
the losses have been unimaginable. How deplorable the conditions were just being in the Royal Navy in the 17th century. You would work in
Who's
this
there? Splash. Don't even have to look. I'm like fucking Curry, dog. Fucking imagine.
And after 3 years of this, they would find an excuse not to pay you at all. This is why a lot of them became pirates. There was a saying that the only difference between prison and the Navy is that in the Navy you might drown too. If you are 25 years old, you have lived through more than 10% of the history of the United States of America. When I was 18, my hometown celebrated 700 years and it is far from the oldest town in Europe. Dublin recently turned 1,000 island.
Yay.
I am in my early 20s. When my grandmother was a child, living in the South,
Nope.
an elderly neighbor would tell
Man.
Grandma about how when she was herself a little girl, she remembered seeing the Confederate troops march by in the Civil War. It's so strange to think that an event which seems so distant really happened within 2 human
Bang.
To clarify, this is the
Oh.
Southern Army.
Hi, can we get it?
Born in
Can we
1790
get
at the start of the French Revolution. John Tyler still today has some living
Oh.
in the late 1800s. Writers complained that young adults are losing touch with reality.
Villanova.
Sitting at the dinner table with family that have their noses buried in a magazine. In the late 1800s, music paper producers claimed that illegally copying sheet music would destroy the entire
Magenta. Got it, baby.
The largest empire in the world at the time, by meeting them in the field of infant combat. And he did it twice in the first battle. He was outnumbered 7-1. In the second battle, he was outnumbered 10-1. And he fucking decimated the Persians. Edit, Darius III. And he conquered and ruled one of the largest empires in history. He was 32 when he died. I'm 32 and still feel like I'm too young to have kids. That the Romans and the Chinese
I'm just gonna let him die.
and actually communicated semi-regularly. The Chinese called the Romans Dakin and envisioned them as a kind of mirror China on the other side.
Man.
Oxford University is also
80
the
points. 2 for 1.
that Cambridge
So you
University
get 83 to
is
close
open to
out.
Easter Island Heads. And that Oxford is so old no
Give me
one
that shit.
knows when it was
Give me that
actually
shit.
founded.
Pull up. Let's ski. Mom, I was
1096.
I was spamming eggs.
That has been going on. The last American Civil War widow's pension was paid in 2003. Edit. Thanks to you, Tom, for reminding me that America isn't the only country. There was also a Confederate soldier that
I'm just gonna dribble it out.
veteran hospital in the 1950s.
Nope.
They originally wouldn't treat him.
Let's shoot that bitch. Yeah. 83 right here.
He was just originally denied.
Magenta. They close of the game, boys.
I'm sure everything will
Oh, boy.
I did almost everything.
Old Spice moisturized and shit.
You stupid ass.
The last execution by guillotine was after the first Star Wars movie. Bear in mind that
How much I wrote though? I had 69 points something.
it was by far the most humane method of execution out there. Argue reasons. I sure as hell wouldn't want to roll the dice with what passes for lethal injection nowadays. It only seems better since it happens in a clean room with a man in a lab coat. That at the same time the US Civil War was going on, which killed about 600,000 people and served as probably our greatest national tragedy. China was in the throes of the Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion is the largest civil conflict in human history, and best estimates put the death toll somewhere north of 20 million. Really reminds you of just how many more people in Asia. America was one of the top of importing hippos. I read an article not long ago about Pablo Escobar's hippos from his private zoo, and how they've escaped the confines of what used to be the Park Zoo. And no one really knows how many of them are out there, because unlike Africa, Colombia has no seasonal grass, so they reproduce basically unchecked. A bit more recent history, but in 1956, Corvette and Wildcraft
Just curious.
stole a small plane from New Jersey and then landed it perfectly on the narrow street in front of the bar he had been drinking at. Then, 2 years later, he did it again after Ramat didn't believe he had done it the first time. The fact that this guy stole 2 planes when drunk and landed them perfectly blows my mind. Here is an article about it. Pluto didn't even get to complete one orbit around the sun between the time it was discovered and the time it was declassified as a planet.
Dang.
It is believed that the human population dipped as low as 1,000 people about 70,000 BCE. We could very well have been a few stillbirths or saber-tooth mornings away from extinction. When reduced to such low numbers, the survival of a species truly teeters on an ice edge. It's a difference of a handful of birds. Too few and you dip below minimum viable population. Our survival could have come down to something as trivial as some tribe finding spring or gazelle in the nick of time. That the Roman Empire existed for over 2,000 years in one form or another, and there were people calling themselves Romans until the 1800. Epcot, the entire theme park at Walt Disney World, was built in 3 years. It takes longer to get new shopping plazas finished today. Largest construction job in the world at the time. Not only did John Adams and Thomas Jefferson die
See how much the score is going for.
it was on the 4th of July, the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson died
Woo!
first. Adams' last words were Jefferson license and used in a
That's
speech
their
in
coffee
Yale.
race.
We went on the moon.
Yes, that's
A
question.
fleeting vestige of the past. Super far away in space. That's mental to me. We went to the moon 60 years after the first primitive plane was invented. And we're 45 years and counting since. And Frank and MLK were born in the same year. 1. Julius Caesar was once kidnapped by pirates. He laughed at the ransom they were demanding and ordered them to increase it. He made them listen to his poetry and berated them if they complained. He threatened to crucify them, and once he was set free, he did just that. 2. Olga of Kiev. Her husband was murdered by a rival tribe. Sir tried to get her to marry one of their men, and she agreed. She invited them over and had her servants dig a hole and burn the visitors alive. Then she sent pigeons and sparrows with sulphur tied to their legs into the village and burned it to the ground. She was a bandage. I'm glossing over all of this. I could be wrong, but this is what I remember. I teach history at a high school, and I realized today that we've been using guns in war for close to 600 years. The Austro-Hungarian Empire once lost 10,000 men after accidentally attacking itself over a bottle of schnapps. 10 US. President
No, I think that's all I'm going to stream for now. I'm just too dead from work. Until next time, boys. It's been fun. It's been real.
Just learned this in my history class today. There are no more living